everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel. It is lovely to have you here. Today I'm going to be going over all of the books that I read in the month of January. This month I read 7 books. I've decided not to continue reading any books that I really dislike, with the exception of like 1 book. Also, I will be spoiling things, so if you have not read a book, just beware as soon as the book pops up and I start talking about it that I will be spoiling things for you. I decided to do that because that is what I want to do. I did a 2022 reading wrap up of all of the books that I read, and I didn't really go into detail about those books and why I liked them or why I didn't like them. So this time I've actually been taking notes while I've been reading. Also, I am doing the buzzword challenge. If you don't know what that is, it is on Storygraph, the app. This other YouTuber, I don't remember who it was, mentioned this challenge. That's the buzzword challenge. And basically every month you have to find a book that relates to the buzzword. So the buzzword for January was life or death. One of the books that I read was called Love Lives Here. So I will be talking about that a little bit later, but I just wanted to mention that that was my book for the buzzword challenge this month. I started out this month reading Queen of Shadows, which is the 4th book in the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I started to like the characters a little bit more in this book. However, I didn't like the, if you can even call it romance, it was really just lust between the 2 main characters. I'm curious as to whether she wrote Court of Thorns and Roses or Throne of Glass first, because there are glaring similarities between the 2. And the whole nightgown thing, I don't know what it is with her and nightgowns. I think it was just very long drawn out. I loved that their relationship was developing in the 3rd book, but I'm not a fan of being led on to believe that something is going to be rewarded later on, and it was not. The 3rd book was really confusing emotionally because it's like, wait, is this a romance or not? But he's like bound to her. I did not like that. I love Court of Thorns and Roses. I love that romance story a whole lot better. Next, unfortunately, I read The Atlas 6. This book was so hyped up, so I was surprised I did not like this. At first, I thought I was gonna love it. I was reading into the characters and I was like, oh nice, we're introducing all of the different characters, but you really do not care for them. You do not root for any of them at all. I disliked all of them. I didn't feel attached to any of them. I really loved that there was a short intro to the story and the kind of moral of the story. I thought that was cute. Also, I don't know if this is a new version of the book thing, but I loved the illustrations. I thought they were so well done. I don't know who did them. You could just tell who each character was and they were beautiful. The vocabulary in this book, especially after reading Queen of Shadows, I was like, whoa, it was night and day. I didn't like how she would use the parentheses to read. I felt like there were too many descriptions about how the characters were feeling and musing about how the others are feeling. Like, oh, I wonder if this person feels this about, and this person, does this feel this person? It's like, stop musing about it and just get on with it. Obviously, it gives me Secret History vibes, and I thought it was gonna be kind of similar, but this doesn't even hold a candle. Is that a phrase? It's the same kind of vibe. And for some reason, there's always like an orgy element. I don't know what the heck that's about. And unfortunately, the stakes were not there. You know somebody has to die, but unfortunately, you just don't care if any of them do. I hate when the stakes disappear because somebody was kidnapped and oh, they count that as somebody died. Like, it's just a cop-out. It did not feel rewarding to me. Also, she set up the book in a way that made you think that Nico and Libby were going to have a relationship because it was like enemies to lovers setup, and then suddenly we're amicable and we can get along. Like, what? Okay, next up, completely different genre. I read Love Lives Here by Maria Goff, which counts as my buzzword challenge book. This reading pattern is really weird to me because I jump from like genre to genre, but it's because I read whatever book is available for me first from the library. There were so many beautiful anecdotes in this book that I felt really tied in these lessons about living authentically and just made me want to be a better person. She does talk about God a lot. I am someone who's kind of newer to believing in God, I would say. She just put these metaphors and things in here that made me feel like I was getting closer to her, but also closer to God at the same time. And it just made me feel like wholesome. It was comforting. It was not a read that I wanted to rush. She talks a lot about raising her kids and how she grew up and her sense of community and things like that. And it just made me reflect a lot on my own experience and also made me have more appreciation for God, like just more love in my heart. This, I wrote this down, so funny. This did what the What Colors Your Parachute book couldn't do for me. But it's not about career necessarily. It's about your whole life, which I find more motivating than a book that's just like, what's your career? This was at the level that I needed needed it to be, like spiritually. It really helped me put things into perspective. So next up, I read the third Bridgerton book, An Offer from a Gentleman. I read this because I thought it was going to be about Penelope and Colin. If you haven't watched Bridgerton, go watch it. I'm gonna spoil things for you now. I had been watching the second season of Bridgerton with my sister because she hadn't seen it before. We were curious about what the third season was gonna be like. They do allude to the fact that it's going to be about Colin and Penelope and their love story. So I thought that this was gonna be that, but it's completely separate. It's about Benedict and this girl named Sophie. It's like Cinderella, and I loved it so much. I was obsessed with this book. I loved the romance, and I already loved Benedict as a character. Perfect amount of spiciness, and it was the perfect feel-good, predictable romantic ending. Just wait till I get to the fourth book. I have so many thoughts. Okay, next up, I tried but did not finish Babel. The introduction felt very defensive. Who wants to go into a book feeling like the author is already defending themselves for their opinions? I was like, just let me read the material. Unless, of course, this author was speaking at a convention at Oxford, I don't think it was necessary to put that introduction in there. Let the work speak for itself, and if you must, put that information at the end of the book. It was defensive, it was condescending. I felt like the author was trying too hard. There were so many asterisks. I was like, for the love of God, please just say what you mean to say. And because I was reading on the ebook on my iPad, like I tried to click on it and then it wouldn't bring me to it was very frustrating, and it's just information overload, and I just hated it. I think I got 50 pages in. It was so boring. That's why I stopped reading it. Then I started reading a very good book. However, I was not able to finish this one because I had a skip the line loan, which means you only get it for like 7 days, and I had only started reading it on like the 5th day. So I only got like 1 or 2 chapters into this book, and that is The Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. What I loved about this that Babel did not do is that she put us in the middle of the action right away. And by middle, I mean climax of this character's like story, and then we go back to the beginning. Immediately, I know where we are on the map. That is very important to me visually for some reason. I just love being able to look at the map and start reading, and she names a place and I'm like, okay, let me go back, look at it. Okay, I know where this character is walking. I love those details so much. That's part of the reason why I loved the Shadow and Bone series. That's basically all I have because I didn't really get that far into it, but it's already interesting to me. Shifting gears again, I read Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. So this book was originally written by Napoleon Hill in 1938, but it was not published until 2011. He has this interview with the devil, which takes up most of the book. I actually first heard about this book on a podcast called Manifestation Babe. One thing I didn't like about at least the version I read was that this other author lady, she put in her own notes, Sharon something. She put in her own notes after like every paragraph or so or every chapter of Napoleon Hill's book, and I did not like that because some of the notes were actually very limiting, and I was like, this is the opposite of what this book is standing for. There are some gems in here. Your only limitation is the one which you set up in your own mind. You can kind of get the theme of this book. It's about having a purpose, surrounding yourself with good people, not letting fear or anything get in your way. It actually really shifted my perspective. I just relaxed. And I kept repeating that mantra to myself, definiteness of purpose. And I felt such an ease about my life. And I have tried to carry that in my life since that day forward. So I highly recommend this book. It has changed my life. Next up, because I just wanted to know what happens between Penelope and Colin, I read Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. It's so easy to get back into these books because all of the characters are the same pretty much, but it's a slightly new plot, it's a new romance, so of course it's exciting. At first, Colin and Penelope are so much more likable than they are in the series. Also, we know that she's Lady Whistledown in the series, but in the book it's more interesting because nobody knows yet. Plus, I feel like starting from a rockier place in the relationship between the two main characters is always more rewarding when they do end up together in the end. But I am so tired of hearing language like snarling and growled to describe human behavior. Nobody snarls or growls and like, just come up with something more clever, please, I beg of you. And literally this was so spicy. I was not expecting it. It was so spicy, and I felt like their lust happened way quicker than I thought. I thought it was gonna be this nice romance that flowered into this thing, but no, it did not. I quickly became wanting to put this book down. Did not like Colin at all. I despised Colin, actually. Very problematic. He's lusting over Penelope all of a sudden. Doesn't even know if he loves her. There's like this comment where he says brand her as his. Gross, disgusting. I hate that the author always says Colin never got angry. Colin was never an angry person. Here he is being angry. He was physically and emotionally abusive. He was scary to me. I was scared of him reading the book. And also he was jealous of her just because he had no life's purpose. Like, it was disgusting. The last 200 pages I did not want to read, but I did anyway because I just wanted to see how it ended. And on to my final book this month. I read Alias Grace. I keep wanting to say Alias Grace, but that's not right. And this is by Margaret Atwood. I have never actually read a Margaret Atwood book until now. I don't know what made me want to read this book. It was available at the library and it was on my list, so I read it. Little did I know this would be my favorite book this month. I loved the beginnings of this book because we get a glimpse of imagery of Grace's inner thoughts and feelings towards the situation. We don't know what's going on, which is perfect because she doesn't know what's going on either. And then we get these 4-line verses of society's like sing-songy opinions about her. And I think that's perfect because if I was in this society too, I would be hearing about it from society's perspective. It's like we just heard the rumor along with everybody else. And then I also love that we see how she sees what everybody else thinks happened to her. And then you actually like get to her story and she's like, for the most part, pretty level-headed, pretty calm about things. It's interesting and also sad at the same time to see how she is a constant and the doctor's the one who's deteriorated. And he should be the one locked up because he has some weird dark thoughts. He creeps me out. At first I was like, oh, there might be like a romance or something between them. So naive of me. I like the line where she said, there's no fool like an educated fool. Definitely gave me the Crucible vibes. However, I actually thought the characters in this were interesting. I would have thought I would have been bored by all of the descriptions. I wanted to see everything because you're getting closer and closer to finding clues and trying to figure out what happened. I also learned something new. I learned that to get blood out of clothing, it's better to use cold water instead of hot water. Also, I was very excited to see Jeremiah revealed towards the end as Jerome DuPont. I was like, yes, perfect. Somebody on her side. Finally, someone's gonna get to the bottom of this. Then I was freaking creeped out when her mother started talking. Gave me psycho vibes for sure. I was like having trouble sleeping last night. Also, I was cackling over the letters between Mrs. Humphrey and the doctor's mom. The doctor's mom was like, stop writing to him, leave him alone. He's not interested, girl. Also, it wasn't until the last chapter that I realized the little square drawings that were under the chapter titles, they were the quilts that she's been making this whole time. I didn't realize that until the very last one for some reason. And that's it. I am always looking for new books to read to add to my list, so let me know if you have any good recs, and I will see you in my next video.